This book reads like an ode to your love of medicine, the way you love to practice medicine, your love of literature. But they also say geography is destiny. Do you believe that? You grew up in Africa, you lived in the US, you studied in India, and you have your deep roots in a small community that's tightly knit in Kerala. How do you think geography and your identity shaped you?
Yeah, I think I think the best example is my own family. So, my parents were born in Kerala, educated there, but they came of age with their college degrees just as India became independent from Britain. There were no jobs there, and so separately they answered this ad for jobs in Ethiopia and landed up there, and that changed their destiny completely. We would all not be so many far-flung places if India had been able to accommodate all our aspirations and our ambitions. And then because I was born in Africa, I think my destiny was completely different from theirs. And then at a certain point, my parents moved first to America, and I moved many years later. But it was in moving that my destiny completely changed, and I moved because my education in Ethiopia was interrupted by civil war, by the medical school. And then I eventually finished in India, and I can see all those continents that I've lived in leaving their unique stamp on me, and in many ways informing this novel also. So also I should add that, when you write a novel, one of the biggest decisions is where do you set it? Because I think geography imposes its destiny, if you like, on the narrative. So you set a story in Pasadena, or you set a story in Cortem, it's going to be a very different set of rules that the characters have to live by. So I think that's the sense in which I believe geography is destiny. And I think it's Napoleon who first said that, but lots of people have used
Mhm.
that.
So you alluded to it a little bit, but how did you get started with the book? What was the genesis? Did the research guide you? Did you have a story in your head, and did it take it life of its own? I assume you had to do tons of research.
Yeah, I think, well, I think the first thing is after I had written my previous novel, which was set in Ethiopia, where I felt some authority being able, some confidence being able to write about my childhood home, even though ethnically I was not Ethiopian, so to speak. I felt it. I felt I was. With this book, I think the biggest decision was where to set it. And I had hesitated setting a novel in India because, again, I wasn't
Mhm.
born and didn't grow up there. I'm very familiar with it from summer vacations and then later in medical school, but it's not quite the same thing as growing up and thinking in Malayalam.
Yeah.
And so it was really seeing a document that my mother had written. My 5-year-old niece asked my mother, "What was it like, Amachi, when you were a little girl?" And my mother was so taken by that question because, here she was in her 70s then, trying to describe to a 5-year-old what it was like in a village without electricity or water. And yet that wasn't a deprivation. Actually, as a child, I thought it was magical to see, the glow of lamplight all over the house. It was much prettier than the harshness of electricity when it came. So my mom began to write these series of anecdotes about our community and her childhood, and illustrating it with little sketches of common objects and dresses. And in revisiting that document, even though those stories didn't really pop up in my book, it was just a reminder of the richness of any community, but our community, because it's the one I know. The
Mhm.
richness of tradition of faith from St. Thomas the Apostle in 52 AD, and yet it's a faith whose rituals have a lot of Hindu traditions that have still been retained, and then the desire to stay within that community that results in
Mhm.
remarriages and all the premium that's placed on the reputation of a family. So it had all the elements of a good place to set a story. And I think if I hesitated, it was because I didn't know it quite as well as someone who's native born. But I tried to make up for that with a lot of research and by enlisting the help of wonderful experts who had that authority, and they weren't necessarily writers, but they had the authority that they could inform someone like me trying to write about it. So that's really how it came about. I only had the geography,
Okay.
and I had a sense that I wanted this to be a family over several generations, because I'm drawn to those kinds of stories. Stories are instructions for living, and
Mhm.
it's only in the span of 3 generations that you get the kind of wisdom that you're seeking. I mean, not always, but I'm drawn to that. And I also had early on that the family would carry an inherited condition that would be passed on, because it's always fascinated me how in medicine you have, even today, we have things that we have a label for, but we don't understand. In 70 years, that label will be replaced by something much more accurate. So I love the idea of having this conceit run through the novel of a inherited condition that gets ultimately unraveled
Yeah.
by the sweep of time, nothing else.